Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. As I sit here, the soft hum of the projector in the background, I can't help but reflect on how life can take the most unexpected turns. My name is Emma and I've always been passionate about the arts, particularly drama. There's something magical about the stage where stories come to life. Emotions are raw and for a fleeting moment, reality bends to the will of the playwright. I teach at a local high school where I try to instill this love for theater in my students. They are my canvas and I their guide through the labyrinth of expression. My life has been fairly straightforward, or so I thought, until recent events turned everything upside down. My husband, Lucas, is a software engineer, a man of logic and precision, the perfect counterbalance to my creative chaos. He's the one who keeps our world grounded, while I often have my head in the clouds dreaming up the next big scene together. We share our home with Leo, our loyal and affectionate Cooper. Our life seemed picture perfect, filled with laughter, love and the occasional bark from Leo. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a storm was brewing, one that would challenge the very foundation of our marriage. It started subtly, like the first whispers of a storm you can feel in the air before the sky darkens. Lucas had been working late more often, his eyes distant. When he was home, I chalked it up to the demands of his job, the endless lines of code that seemed to consume him. But then, the signs became undeniable. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I noticed a text message on his phone. It was innocuous enough, a simple "can't wait to see you." But the name attached wasn't one I recognized. My heart skipped a beat, not out of jealousy, but out of a sudden, inexplicable fear. I didn't confront him then. Instead, I watched, waited, and pieced together the puzzle of our unraveling life. There were late-night calls, secretive smiles, and an air of distraction that hadn't been there before. My world, once filled with the vibrant colors of our shared dreams, began to fade into shades of gray. The theater, my sanctuary, became a place of solace and escape. I poured my heart into my work, directing the school play with an intensity that surprised even me. The students felt it too, the raw energy, the unspoken pain that fueled our rehearsals. They didn't know the source, but they responded to it, their performances becoming more profound, more real. But no amount of drama could distract me from the reality at home. One night after a particularly grueling rehearsal, I came home to find Lucas packing a suitcase. The sight of it, the finality of the act, hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. "Emma," he started, his voice a mix of guilt and resolve. "I need to tell you something." I stood there, the script I was holding slipping from my grasp, the words on the page blurring as tears welled up. "What is it, Lucas?" My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. He took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't plan for this to happen, but it did, and to think I'm in love with her." The room spun, the colors of our life together, bleeding into one another, creating a murky, indistinct palette. Love, the very emotion I taught my students to portray with authenticity, was now the weapon that was tearing us apart. I didn't scream or cry. I simply nodded, my mind racing to find the right line, the perfect exit from this scene. But there was no script for this. No director to call cut and reset the stage as Lucas left the door, closing with a soft click. I was left in the silence of our home, the echo of his departure reverberating through the empty rooms. Leo, sensing my distress, came to sit by my side, his head resting on my lap, offering silent comfort. In the days that followed, I found myself at the theater more often, the stage becoming my refuge. The students, unaware of my personal turmoil, thrived under my direction, their performances gaining depth from my own emotional turmoil. But life, much like a play, has its acts and scenes. And just when you think you've reached the climax, another twist awaits. It was during one of these rehearsals that I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm, and it chilled me to the bone. "Emma, this is Detective Harris. I need to speak with you about your husband, Lucas." The world paused, the actors on stage, freezing in their tableau. My heart, already bruised, now pounded with a new, terrifying rhythm. What could possibly go wrong in such an idyllic setting? I was about to find out. It was a typical Saturday, the kind where Lucas would be engrossed in his coding projects, and I would be planning my next lesson, or perhaps indulging in some gardening. That day, however, I decided to explore the old barn at the edge of our property, a place we rarely visited since it was filled with old, forgotten farm equipment. The barn had always held a mysterious allure for me, a relic of simpler times. As I wandered through the dusty cobweb space, I felt a strange sense of freedom away from the structured life I led. Leo, ever the curious companion, followed me, his tail wagging with excitement. We played fetch with an old tennis ball, and for a moment, all was right in the world. However, as the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows through the barn's broken windows, something shifted within me, an inexplicable urge, a curiosity that I couldn't quite understand. The barn was more than just a storage space. It was a time capsule holding stories in its walls and the series of its wooden beams. In the rust of the old tools, I found myself drawn to a corner where an ancient trunk lay, half covered by a torp. The wood was weathered, the metal bindings rusted, but there was an air of importance about it, as if it had been waiting for someone to open it. With Leo by my side, I knelt down, brushing away the cobwebs and dust. The latch was stiff, but with a bit of effort it gave way. Inside, I discovered layers of yellowed papers, photographs, and what looked like old journals. The topmost item was a photograph of a woman, her smile faint but warm, her eyes full of a life I could only imagine. On the back, in faded ink, was written Amelia, 1943. As I flipped through the papers, a letter caught my eye. It was sealed, the wax stamp still intact. Addressed to someone named Thomas. The handwriting was elegant, the paper brittle. I hesitated, feeling like an intruder, but the need to understand this piece of history, this connection to the past, was overwhelming. I opened the letter, the paper crinkling softly under my fingers. The words were penned with a careful hand, speaking of love, of a promise to wait, of a future that was never to be. Amelia wrote of her longing for Thomas, who had gone off to war, and her hope for his safe return. The letter was dated just before the end of World War II, but there was no indication if Thomas ever came back. The story of Amelia and Thomas hidden away in this barn resonated with me. Here was a love story cut short by circumstances beyond their control. Much like my own life, seemed to be unraveling. I sat back, the letter in my lap, feeling the weight of time and the echoes of lives lived before mine. Leo, sensing my mood, nestled closer, his warmth of comfort against the chill of the barn. I looked around, the shadows growing longer, the air cooler. It was as if the barn itself was whispering its secrets to me, urging me to delve deeper into its history, into the lives that had once thrived here. I decided then to take the true back to the house, to read through its contents at my leisure, to perhaps find some solace or understanding in the stories it held. As I gathered the items, I noticed another object at the bottom, a small locked diary. It was ornate, with a tiny key, still in a lock, as if waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. The diary, like the letter, was from Amelia. Each entry was a snapshot of her life, her fears, her dreams, her daily routines. But one entry stood out, dated shortly after the letter I had read. It spoke of a secret, something she had hidden in the barn, something she hoped Thomas would find if he ever returned. The curiosity that had driven me to the barn now turned into a quest. What was this secret Amelia had hidden? Was it still here, buried under years of neglect and time? The barn, once just a backdrop to our property, now felt like a stage set for a mystery, and I, the unwitting protagonist, was about to delve into its depths with the diary and the letter in hand. I felt a connection to Amelia, a woman whose life had intersected with mine through this forgotten trunk. As I walked back to the house, the sun now dipping below the horizon, I realized that this exploration was not just about uncovering the past, but perhaps finding a way to understand my present. The barn, with its stories and secrets, had given me a new purpose, a distraction from the pain of my crumbling marriage. Maybe in exploring Amelia's life, I could find a way to navigate my own, to find some semblance of peace, or at least a new perspective on the chaos that had become my life. And so, with Leo by my side, I carried the trunk into our home. The old barn, now not just a place of forgotten things, but a gateway to understanding, to healing, and perhaps to a new beginning. The barn, with its musty smell and the creaking of old wood, seemed to whisper secrets of the past. As I sat down on a bale of hay, catching my breath, Leo came over his warm body, pressing against mine. It was then in that moment of solitude that my mind wandered into forbidden territory. The loneliness of the barn, the isolation and perhaps the taboo nature of my thoughts led me down a path I had never imagined. I'd tread in a haze of confusion and a rush of adrenaline. I found myself engaging in an act with Leo that was beyond anything I had ever done or even considered. It was an act of infidelity not just against Lucas but against the very norms of human behavior. The realization hit me like a cold wave as I stood up, my heart pounding, my mind racing with guilt and confusion. I couldn't stay in the barn any longer. The walls seemed to close in the shadows, growing darker, more accusatory. I hurried back to the house, the trunk heavy in my arms, not just from its weight but from the burden of my actions. Once inside, I placed it on the dining table, my hands trembling. As I tried to make sense of what had just happened, the house felt different, now colder, as if it knew of my betrayal. I needed to distract myself to find some semblance of normalcy. I decided to delve into Amelia's diary, hoping her words might offer some solace, or at least a distraction from my own turmoil. The diary was filled with entries about daily life, the war, and her undying love for Thomas, but one entry, dated just after the letter I had found, caught my attention. Amelia wrote about a secret she had hidden in the barn, something she hoped Thomas would find if he ever returned. The mystery of the secret, now intertwined with my own guilt, pulled me back towards the barn. With Leo by my side, I returned, this time with a purpose. The barn seemed less oppressive, now more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. I began to search, moving aside old tools, lifting tops, and peering into every nook and cranny. Hours passed, and as the moon rose, casting an eerie light through the broken windows, I found it hidden behind a loose board. There was a small ornate box. My hands shook as I pulled it out, the dust of decades swirling around me. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a locket. It was beautiful silver with intricate engravings, and inside 3 small portraits, one of Amelia, the other presumably Thomas. The locket was a symbol of love, of waiting, of hope. Holding it, I felt a connection to Amelia, a woman whose life had been so different from mine, yet was now inexplicably linked through this bond, through this secret. But the discovery did little to alleviate my guilt. If anything, it intensified it. Here was a tangible piece of a love story, pure and unblemished by the complexities of modern life, and I had just tainted something equally sacred in my own life. I sat back, the locket in my hand, the barns, silent, except for the occasional rustle of Leo moving around. The weight of my actions felt like a physical burden pressing down on me. I knew I had to confront this to understand why I had crossed such a line. Was it the isolation, the betrayal by Lucas? Or was it something deeper, a part of me I had never acknowledged? The barn, with its history and secrets, seemed to offer a space for reflection, for understanding. I decided to keep the locket not as a trophy of my discovery, but as a reminder of what love should be. Pure, hopeful and enduring. Maybe in understanding Amelia's story, I could begin to understand my own, to navigate the chaos of my emotions and perhaps find a path to redemption. As I walked back to the house, the locket safe in my pocket, I felt a resolve forming. I needed to address what had happened, not just with Leo, but with myself. The barn had given me more than just a historical artifact. It had given me a mirror to look into my own soul. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, the locket beside me, and began to write. Not in a diary like Amelia, but in a letter to myself, to Lucas, to anyone who might one day find it. I wrote about my confusion, my loneliness, my betrayal, and my hope for forgiveness, for understanding. The act of writing was cathartic, each word a step towards acknowledging my actions, towards seeking some form of peace. The barn, with its musty air and creaking wood, had become more than just a place of secrets. It had become a confessional, a place where I could confront the darkest parts of myself. And as I sealed the letter, placing it in an envelope, I realized that this was just the beginning. The journey to understanding, to healing was long, but perhaps, like Amelia, I could find my way back to something resembling love, something pure with Leo by my side. I knew I wasn't alone, even if the path ahead was uncertain. The days following were a blur. I avoided Lucas, unable to look him in the eye, my guilt eating away at me. I tried to bury myself in work, but every lesson, every interaction with my students felt like a performance, a mask to hide the turmoil inside. Leo, sensing my distress, stayed close, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of my betrayal. One evening as I was grading papers, Lucas noticed my unusual behavior. He approached me with a gentle concern in his eyes, his voice soft as he asked Emma, "What's been going on? You've been so distant lately." I pushed him away, my voice strained as I replied, "It's just work. Lucas, the play, the students. It's all been overwhelming." But the life felt heavy on my tongue and his concern only grew. He didn't press further that night, but the next day he suggested we take a walk, just the three of us. He said, his tone hopeful, to reconnect, to talk about whatever's been bothering you. The idea of being alone with him, away from the distractions of home and work, terrified me. Yet I knew I couldn't keep pushing him away without explanation. So I agreed, my heart pounding with the weight of my secret. We walked along the river near our home, the water's gentle flow, a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Lucas tried to lighten the mood, talking about mundane things, but his eyes kept searching mine for something more. Finally, he stopped, turning to face me. "Emma, I know it's more than just work. Please tell me what's wrong. We can work through anything together." The sincerity in his voice, the earnestness in his gaze, it all made the confession bubble up inside me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself saying, "I've just been feeling lost. Lucas, like, I'm not sure who I am anymore." He took my hand, his touch warm and familiar, yet it felt like a betrayal to myself. "You're my wife, Emma. You're the woman who teaches kids to dream, to feel, to express. That's who you are." His words, meant to comfort, only deepened my guilt. I wanted to tell him to unburden myself, but the fear of losing him, of shattering our life together, held me back. We continued walking, the silence between us, now filled with unspoken questions. I could feel Lucas's patience wearing thin, his need for clarity growing. As we reached a bench overlooking the river, he sat down, pulling me gently to sit beside him. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "Maybe we should see someone, a counselor, to help us navigate whatever this is." The suggestion was like a lifeline, yet it also felt like a trap. Counseling meant opening up, revealing the darkest parts of myself. Could I do that? Could I bear the judgment, the potential disgust in his eyes? I nodded, not trusting my voice, my heart racing with the implications of what I had agreed to. Lucas seemed relieved, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "We'll get through this, Emma. I promise." His promise, his faith in us. It was almost too much. I wanted to believe in it, in us. But the secret I held was a chasm between what was and what could be. As we walked back home, the sun setting behind us, casting long shadows over our path, I knew I was at a crossroads. The walk had not brought the clarity I hoped for, but it had set the stage for a confrontation with my own conscience. Back at home, I retreated to our bedroom, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, Leo curled up at my feet, his steady breathing a stark contrast to my tumultuous thoughts. The night stretched on each minute, a reminder of the confession I was yet to make. Would I find the courage to speak the truth? Or would I continue to hide behind my lies, letting them fester like a wound that refuses to heal? The answer eluded me, lost in the shadows of our room, as I wrestled with the reality of my actions and the love I still felt for Lucas. The stage was set, the audience of my own guilt watching, intently waiting for the next act in this tragic play of my life. As we walked, the tension between us was as palpable as the cool evening air. Lucas, ever the problem solver, tried to dissect my mood to find a logical explanation for the change he sensed in me. His concern was genuine, his questions probing yet gentle. But with each step towards the barn, the place where my life had taken a dark turn, I felt more cornered, the weight of my secret becoming unbearable. The barn loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the setting sun that painted the sky in hues of guilt and regret. Here in this very place I had crossed a line that I never thought I would. The memories of that afternoon flooded back, overwhelming me with a mix of confusion and deep remorse. With a trembling voice, I stopped at the barn's entrance. "Lucas," I began, my words faltering. "There's something I need to tell you." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the anticipation of a storm about to break. I took a deep breath, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "That day when you were away, I did something unforgivable." My voice shook as I recounted the afternoon in the barn, the isolation, the loneliness, and the act with Leo that had left me shattered. Lucas's face went from concern to shock, then to a mix of hurt and disbelief. His eyes, usually so full of understanding, now searched mine for an explanation, for some sign that this was a cruel jest. But there was no jest, only the raw, painful truth. I was lost. Lucas. I felt abandoned, betrayed. And in that moment I made a choice that I can't take back. My confession hung in the air, the silence that followed deafening, filled with the echoes of our shattered trust. Lucas stepped back, his hands running through his hair, a gesture of frustration and confusion. "Emma too, don't know what to say." His voice was a whisper barely audible over the rustling leaves. This is beyond anything I could have imagined." The hurt in his eyes was palpable, a mirror to the pain I felt inside. "I understand if you can't forgive me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to, but I needed you to know the truth. I couldn't keep this from you any longer." He turned away, pacing his mind, visibly racing to process what I had just revealed. "I suggested counseling because I thought we could work through whatever was bothering you. But this," he paused, his back still. "To me, this changes everything." I stood there, feeling the world tilted under my feet. The barn, once a place of solace, now felt like a tomb for our relationship. "I am sorry. Lucas, I'm so sorry." I repeated the words, feeling hollow, inadequate against the enormity of my betrayal. He faced me again, his expression a mix of pain and resolve. "I need time, Emma, time to think, to understand this isn't just about us anymore. It's about who we are, what we've become." The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving us in the twilight, a metaphor for the ambiguity of our future. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight," he said, his voice steady but distant. "We need space to figure out what this means for us." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "I understand." I managed to say, my heart heavy with the realization that our life together might never be the same. As Lucas walked away, his figure disappearing into the growing darkness, I felt a profound sense of loss. The barn, with its secrets and shadows, had witnessed the unraveling of our marriage. I turned back towards the house, Leo by my side, his presence now a painful reminder of my actions inside the house, felt empty, the silence oppressive. I sat at the kitchen table, the locket from Amelia's era in my hand, its weight now symbolic of the burden I carried. I opened it, looking at the portraits of Amelia and Thomas, their love story now a stark contrast to the turmoil in mine. The night stretched on each minute, a reminder of the confession I had made. Would Lucas find it in his heart to forgive me, or would this be the end? The answer eluded me, lost in the shadows of our home, as I wrestled with the reality of my actions and the love I still felt for him. The stage was set, the audience of my own guilt, watching intently, waiting for the next act in this tragic play of my life. The days following my confession were a blur of pain and regret. Lucas needed time, space to process what I had revealed. Our home, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and distant. We decided on counseling, a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of our marriage. The sessions were grueling, filled with tears, anger, and attempts at understanding. As for Leo, I could no longer look at him without feeling a pang of guilt. Eventually we agreed that he would go to live with Lucas' sister, where he could be loved without the shadow of my actions. Life moved forward, but not as it was. I threw myself into my work, using drama as an escape, a way to live through characters who could express what I could not. Lucas and I were trying day by day to rebuild, to forgive, to understand. The ban, now locked and avoided, stands as a silent testament to a moment of madness, a reminder of how fragile our lives can be. The first counseling session was like stepping into a confessional. Only this time the sins were mine, laid bare for a stranger to dissect. Dr. Amelia, our counselor, had a calm demeanor, her office filled with soft, muted colors that seemed to absorb the tension in the room. "Emma, why don't you start by sharing what's been on your mind?" Dr. Amelia's voice was gentle, encouraging. I took a deep breath, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I've done something I can't undo, and it's tearing us apart. My voice was barely above a whisper, the weight of my confession making it hard to speak. Lucas sat beside me, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on some distant point. She told me about what happened with Leo. He said, his voice strained as if each word was a stone. He had to force out, "Dr." Amelia nodded, her expression unreadable. "And how did that make you feel, Lucas?" He looked at me. Then his eyes filled with a mix of hurt and confusion, betrayed, confused, disgusted. I don't know how to process this, how to move past it. The session continued, each of us taking turns to speak, to explain, to cry. Dr. Amelia listened occasionally, asking questions that felt like she was peeling back layers of our relationship, exposing the raw, vulnerable parts. "Emma, can you tell me why you felt compelled to act in that way, Dr.?" Amelia asked, her pen poised over her notepad. I swallowed hard, the memory of that day and the barn flooding back. I felt so alone, so abandoned. It was like I was losing everything, and in that moment I lost control. I made a choice that was wrong, so very wrong. Lucas's hand found mine, squeezing it tightly, a gesture that felt both comforting and accusatory. "I understand feeling alone, Emma. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Dr." Amelia leaned forward, her gaze intense. "It's important to understand that these feelings, these actions come from a place of deep emotional distress. Emma, you were seeking connection, albeit in a way that was inappropriate. Lucas, your reaction is valid, but it's crucial to explore why this happened, not just to condemn it." The sessions became our new routine, a weekly pilgrimage to try and mend what was broken. Each time I felt like I was on trial, explaining my actions, my feelings, my guilt. Lucas, for his part, shared his struggles with trust, with the image of our life together now tainted. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we walked home in silence. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. Emma, Lucas finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I'm trying, I really am. But every time I look at you, I see." That day I stopped turning to face him, the streetlights casting long shadows over us. "I know, Lucas, and I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it back, erase it from our lives." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know you do. And maybe with time we can find a way to not let it define us." The weeks turned into months, and with each session we peeled back more layers of our pain, our fears, our hopes. We talked about everything from the mundane to the profound. We discussed our dreams, our disappointments, the roles we played in each other's lives. In one session, Dr. Amelia introduced an exercise where we had to write letters to each other expressing what we couldn't say face to face. Reading Lucas's letter where he detailed his struggle with forgiveness, his love for me, despite everything, was like a balm to my soul. "Emma, I've been thinking a lot about what you did about us. I'm not saying it's okay, because it's not. But I see you trying, and I want to try too. I want to believe in us again." He read, his voice thick with emotion. I wrote back, pouring out my remorse, my desire to rebuild, to be better. "Lucas, I know I've broken something precious. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that I can be the person you merit, the person you deserve." The barn, once a place of solace and secrets, now stood as a locked door to a past we were both trying to move beyond. I avoided it, the sight of it a reminder of my lapse in judgment. But one day, as I was walking past, I noticed the door slightly ajar. The lock broken. Curiosity, mixed with a sense of dread, led me. Inside, the dust was thick, the air stale. But there, on the floor, was a new letter. It wasn't from Amelia or Thomas. It was from Lucas. "Emma, I came here today not to confront the past, but to understand it." I read Amelia's diary, her longing for Thomas. It made me think about us, about what we've lost and what we might still find. "I'm not ready to forgive, but I'm here trying to understand. Maybe, like Amelia, we can find our way back to each other." Tears blurred my vision as I held the letter. The barn no longer just a place of my darkest moment, but a bridge to our potential reconciliation. The journey was far from over. Each day was a step, sometimes forward, sometimes back, But with each counseling session, with each honest conversation, with each moment of shared silence, we were building something new, something fragile yet hopeful. Will Emma and Lucas find their way back to each other? Or has the trust been irrevocably broken? Only time would tell. But for now, we were trying day by day to rebuild, to forgive, to understand. The barn, with its musty air and creaking wood, had become more than just a place of secrets. It had become a symbol of our struggle, our pain, and our tentative steps towards healing. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks.